tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
Sports psychology is particularly is unique in the sense that it's solely interested in the psychological element of sport, and that's a small sentence for something that actually covers a huge number of things. And there are different perspectives on sports psychology, and people have different expertise in it. But essentially, it's about you are a sports person. It doesn't have to be an elite Olympic level. Anybody who plays sport. You ask them, is there some kind of mental element to their game, whatever that sport may be, whether they play it competitively or just for fun. The vast majority of people will say there is some kind of mental element to being successful, to training, to being motivated, to all those things that are associated with sports. So sports psychology is particularly interested in all those things. And from a sort of positive psychology perspective, it's how we can enhance athletes or people who play sport, how we can enhance their performance through psychology. So we acknowledge, obviously, you need to be physically fit and be able to have the skill to play the sport, but you also need lots of psychological sort of edges as well. So you need to be motivated, you need to be focused, you need to be able to control your arousal and emotions, you have to control your aggression. All those kind of things are hugely important in sport, and particularly as you start getting at the higher level, that's the thing that makes the difference between someone who's very good and then someone who's the best in the world. They're able to deal with the pressure, and there is a lot of pressure in sport, particularly competitive sport. They're able to deal with that in a very positive way. I'm particularly interested in this notion of how we get people to be physically active, and what helps maintain it as a habit, because it's that which is of most importance, really. I mean, getting people started is great, and obviously you need to start. But in terms of health and mental health benefits, you need to do it regularly over your life, really. So I'm quite interested in that, and have taught that and researched that for the last few years. In terms of physical health, exercise is hugely important. I mean, if you look at the research, the relationship between exercise and chronic health conditions. So what I mean by that is things like cardiovascular heart disease, various types of cancer, respiratory illness, type 2 diabetes. The relationship between them is consistently inverse, in the sense that those people who are active, and that's roughly speaking about 150 minutes per week, so sort of 20-minute bouts. If you accumulate that number of minutes over a week, you're hitting the required amount of physical activity in order to gain health benefits. So it's things like reduction in cardiovascular heart disease, reduction in the various types of cancer, and some other illnesses as well. You're much less likely to develop type 2 diabetes, you're less likely to be overweight. So in terms of physical health, it's very, very important. It's not the only thing that's important. Diet's important, and other habits you may or may not have. But if you have a balanced diet, you don't smoke, you don't drink too much, and you are physically active, the chances are you will live a long, healthy life. And the key to that as well is not just the amount of years you live, but how much life are in those years. So it's how well you are going on. People can live with chronic conditions for a long time, but it is better to live without them, and exercise protects you from that. There's a wealth of evidence over the last 50, 60 years about the relationship between being active, doing exercise, and depression, anxiety, and general well-being. And essentially, again, you are regularly physically active, you are less likely to have depression, less likely to have anxiety or anxiety-related issues, and you're just going to be happier. You're going to be better. You're going to have better mental health. Essentially, two reasons they come to you. It's either they've got an issue that they feel is stopping them perform to their best. So a typical thing is dealing with anxiety and pressure. So people perform really well in a training situation and then move that into a competitive situation. And if you look at it, what they're actually doing is exactly the same. I do a lot of work with rowers, and a 2K rowing race is exactly the same in training as it is competition, but actually it isn't the same. It's completely different, the way what you take to it and how you interpret it. So what you often find, and I've found this with people I've worked with, is it's dealing with that pressure. People really can struggle with that, so they'll come to a sports psych and say, how can you help me? And there's various things you can do to all sorts of different frameworks you can work in order to try to enhance and help them. So there's people who come with a problem, and then there's people who don't have an issue as such, but they just want to improve their performance. And in doing, and the reason and how they do that is by trying to gain a mental edge with a sports psychologist. Might be one way they do that anyway. So they come and say, right, let's break down what do you find difficult, how can we enhance your pre-performance routine, how can we use self-talk or imagery to enhance your performance. Like your reaction to stress and how you physically respond are actually very psychological, because they start out with how you interpret a situation. So something that initially can seem very, very threatening, well, actually you can interpret that. Well, you could see it that way, but you could see it as a challenging sort of a possibility to improve rather than something that you're going to do badly at. So you can work with an athlete in that kind of way. There are all sorts of other ways as well. They're harnessing often techniques and things that athletes sort of do already, but they just do in a much sort of ad hoc, less focused way. So a classic question I ask athletes is how much do they train? So they'll say, well, I do 4 hours a day or 3 hours a day or whatever. And then I say, okay, so how much do you train sort of psychologically? Nothing, usually. There's no consistent. I think, from my perspective, sports psychology is about consistency. It's about bringing into your training regime mental training consistently. So it's about, you have dealt with competitions well in the past. Why was it at that competition you did really well and this one less well? And you start looking at the psychological elements and that, say, well, how can we make the positive experience the norm? And you look at, well, how can we enhance your thinking before a match, during a match, afterwards? How do we interpret situations to your advantage? Teams, slightly different model, but you can deliver sports psychology to teams. You start thinking about, right, how can you use these sort of techniques in a team sport? I mean, particularly when you're working with teams, you're often looking at things like team cohesion, group identity, communication in particular. How do people communicate? And often with a sports psych in a group, working with a group, it's all about giving them a space in order to talk about things they don't necessarily want to talk about with the coach, but actually expressing it in the group can be quite helpful. So if a teammate says, well, actually, I'm not really that keen when you shout at me, to the captain or whatever, they might then know, well, actually, maybe this person doesn't respond well to that kind of instruction. Maybe I need to be different with that person. In a rowing sense, if it's a group and there's a cox there, the cox can hear, well, how do you want me to talk to you in a race? How can I motivate you in a race? And then you can look at the individuals and how can we work as a group. What we would do over a series of sessions, we'd identify the issues to start off in the first session. In the second session, we start to come up with an intervention, essentially. So we're going to have a self-taught strategy that you will devise with the athlete. The athlete in between sessions will then go and attempt to do that. Then in another session, they'll come and reflect. And it might take a 6 session, it might take 3 sessions, but it's sort of basically the framework consists of, you provide the training, a bit like a strength and conditioning coach would say, well, this is your program. You go away and attempt it, then you come back and we reevaluate it, and we might set new goals, or we might decide actually that's dealt with the issue. So that's a sort of a loose framework that often is used, irrespective of what the athlete's actually doing, whether it's self-talk or imagery or the relaxation techniques or whatever. It's about teaching. They practice it. You evaluate. You tweak. You keep doing that until they feel, yes, I've got this, and it's really helping, or it is helping, but I could do with something else. And then you might go to something else. But that's essentially the thing you emphasise the most in sports psych is obviously seeing the sports psych is important, but the athlete does the work. The same we were saying about a bicep curl. They're the ones that go away and train their mind to react in a certain way. The mind can be seen like a muscle. You work it in a certain way, it will get stronger, and you'll be able to do more, deal with pressure more, whatever the purpose of the sessions are.
Nutrition is part of your body's essential survival mechanisms via things that are not made by ourselves, as in within our own body. So nutrition provides essential nutrients without which we won't survive. That's nutrition. What you eat directly reflects the bacteria that's in your gut. And the bacteria in your gut can directly affect your behaviour. And we know this for sure. It's becoming more and more and more apparent that gut issues and disruption in gut bacteria, which can be caused by inappropriate food or medications or periods of great stress, bereavements and stuff like that, can alter your gut flora. And that in turn alters the way we behave and the way we think. Incredibly important. Even if you take a very basic level, most people who are vying for sporting performance are firstly really, really interested in their body composition. So they're really interested in their power to weight ratio, for example. Nutrition, eating in the right way, can alter that perceptively in a very, very short space of time. And then it depends on what sort of sporting performance you're looking for. I work with a lot of people who do endurance and ultra endurance stuff. Complete game changer if you get food right. And the other flip side of that is injuries. Sports people who get injured, and how quickly and how well they can recover from it, ultimately relies a huge amount on the food that they're using, and whether it's pro-recovery or anti-recovery. And we see so many people doing the wrong things during recovery from injury, and it just prolongs the injury, makes the repair more likely to fail. So yeah, it's a huge part of it. There is no normal healthy diet, I'm afraid. It's very individual, it's very unique. Some people do eat the same things and they do fine on it, but quite a lot of the time we find different people from different backgrounds have very, very vastly different needs from food. Theoretically, someone like Mo Farah would be eating far fewer calories. He'd relatively be eating a lower amount of protein for sure. Depends on how he trains though. He might have quite a high level of fat, but you can see, whereas your power guys, calories are going to that are consumed are going to be huge in order to maintain muscle mass. A lot of the rugby players you see today, they're huge guys eating a large amount of calories. It's not the calories that provide the muscle, but it's an easy way to refer to it. And they'll often be dosing quite large quantities of protein, for example. So someone like Mo Farah might be, 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight at a push, whereas some of the rugby guys might be up to 2.2, 2.4 kilos of grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So a huge difference in how you manipulate those macronutrients to get a given result. There's a vast difference in quality of supplements, who makes them, how they're produced, how they're delivered, etc., etc. But when it comes to the supplements I do use a pea protein powder for a lot of my clients for convenience. But then we use some protein amino acids, selective amino acids, to try and influence performance legally. It tends to be really interesting, depending on where that person's at. If they're, we sometimes put in supportive stuff. If they're walking the edge of performance versus failure and falling off the edge, so we try and support people through different parts of the season. So if someone's got a big event coming up, for example, about a month out, we'll always put in stuff to support the immune system, that kind of thing, in order, because that's when things start getting tense and they're much more likely to get ill or injured during that period. So we try and head that off by using things medicinally to try and support them. So there's a huge amount going on with supplements. It's very broad. But one of the difficulties is, because of this whole contamination issue, you tend to get quite a level playing field unless you're very inventive. So you need to get quite inventive with supplements, I think. The way we look at science at this moment in time, most modern science was really designed for the pharmaceutical industry and for very isolated things. And if A does B, does C, does D, does it all add up to that? A lot of that sort of science just simply doesn't work with lifestyle intervention. It simply doesn't work with so-called holistic medicine. It simply doesn't work. Try and analyse a bowl of beef dumpling stew, for example. Try and analyse that scientifically. You tell me what's good in it, and it's hugely, hugely difficult. So there is some good science going on, but not very much of it. It's hugely expensive. Who's going to fund it? Who's going to pay for all of these interesting studies that we'd all like to do? The way I keep up to date with it, I'm like any doctor, GP, anything like that. I'm registered with a lot of journals, so I get daily updates. Reading material, books, anything like that. I tend to get through personally about 8 books a week on this subject.
For me, the biggest thing is about people. I love people. I'm fascinated by people. I love spending time with people. I'm intrigued. I want the athletes to be intrigued. I want to give people at this university that come and get involved in sports some of the best people to work with. So we take a long time to select coaches to fit in with a value set that I believe is important, which is about communicating. It's about empowering. It's about the students leading themselves. It's not me or the coaches. Yeah, the technical side and making sure, but allow the players to make decisions on the pitch. For me, that's where some of the best teams have come from. You can see that now with England Rugby. Very, very different under Lancaster as they are under Eddie Jones, and they're different coaches, both good in their own right, but the players seem to be reacting well to what Eddie Jones is doing, and I think that he's got quite a relaxed style, so they have a bit of fun, they have a bit of a laugh as well, and I think that's hugely important, that you have to trust. There has to be a trust built up, and I think that in terms of that coach or management player environment, is you've got to create something where people feel that they're safe and secure, and you can make decisions. And if it's wrong, then we look at it and we do something different. There is no right or wrong. There's just what can we do in a different way to make things better, and maybe performance will come out at the end of that. When I first arrived, they had nearly over 55, 60 students on the performance program, and one of the things I first did was, even when I was working, how do you manage that group of people? How do you, for me, it's so important that I know everyone's name on that squad, that we individualise the program. Everyone on that squad needed something different, whether that's from conditioning, sports psych, food, whatever it would be. So we one of the first things I did was I cut that squad down. I made that to about 25 to 30 people, so we could actually engage them one-on-one in a lot of occasions, and that brought better results because you had better rapport with the athlete, and you were able to advise them, but you were able to see more of them. That was the big thing. It's been a really incredible journey, not just for myself, but seeing where the university is, and obviously we're currently 9th in the Bucks League, which the university's never finished in the top 10. So for me, it would be a hugely proud and incredible moment if we did do that, and that would be everyone that's helped and supported that, from the students to the coaches to the staff to the people that prepare the pitches. It would be a complete joint effort, and so it has been a journey, but it's an incredible one, and I feel like the university is now seeing that sport is a key element of student life. And what it can bring to people. It can produce leaders, it can produce more confident people, it can produce more healthy minds, and I think that we owe the students to provide that service for them as they now pay to come to university. So it's really key that we do that. And so the journey, the great thing about sport, it keeps going. If we finish 9th, then I'll be told, how do you finish 7th? And then that's the next challenge. How do you move forward? How do you keep going in the right direction? Performance can mean quite a lot of different things, and it's a really interesting subject at the moment. For me, it's about people reaching their potential, especially if you're an individual or a team. It's about what can we get out of that group or that individual in order for them to go and perform to their best. But performance means a makeup of a number of different things. I think that kind of when you look at the best teams, if you look at some of the kind of the world greats, from like the All Blacks to the Chicago Bulls to Man United, they've had a number of things in common in terms of that, and they've had incredible coaching staff. They've had a group of people that had an amazing set of values themselves and wanted to create something quite special in that team. Now that will go over a period of time. If you look at Fergie, if you look at the amount of time United were successful at the top, how you sustain performance, I think, is really interesting. I think that you can be good, for 1 year, and it could go wrong. It's a little bit like what's been seen at Leicester this past year, and we all know kind of what went on there with Ranieri. So how do you sustain successes in performance sport is one of my big things, and I think it just comes down to hard work. It comes down to being really reflective. For me, when I look at athletes that really achieve, that they can start to be quite reflective of their own performance and see where they need to make amends or to do things in a different way. And I think when you can create that kind of environment and that kind of rapport, maybe with a coaching staff and your players or your teammates, I think that's when real performance can start to come through and stay.